Welcome to the Bucket Plan on Demand, a podcast for financial advisors based on the best-selling book and process that simplifies financial planning. Hear from skilled industry professionals and special guests each episode that will help perfect your approach with clients and your results.
Welcome, everybody. We've got one of my favorite people in the world joining us today, Greg Hammer. Greg is the president and CEO of Hammer Financial Group. I think everybody here knows Hammer. He's a mentor through C2P. He's a partner at C2P. He's been incredibly instrumental in the growth of C2P. Greg's got over 20 years of experience in the financial services industry. I think a lot of people know the story of Greg, but I've worked with Greg even before C2P. Great team. I see Julie's on the line. She is really the driver of all of that. But of course, has just done an incredible job. And obviously, one of the things that I've pulled from Greg so much is like his language. I always share the story in Bucket Plan 1.0. When Greg came to Cleveland one time, their family was visiting and he came into the office and said, "What are you working on?" And I was trying to figure out how much of the soon bucket should go into an annuity versus assets under management. And he was like, "Why are you struggling with this? Why don't you just ask the client how much of their income they want guaranteed in their plan?" And like instantly we were like, that's a no-brainer question. Why don't we add that to the process? And Greg is definitely a master of language. He's got so many analogies and one-liners to help educate clients. And I think that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Like what we do is very complex. We have a lot of lingo. We have a lot of industry jargon. But at the end of the day, we all know a confused mind typically takes no action. And so I think one of Greg's superpowers is just being able to simplify the language that he uses and how he communicates. And I know that's what we're going to talk about today with Back to the Basics with the Bucket Plan and language for advisors. So appreciate you joining us, Greg.
Oh, I'm excited to be here with you, Dave.
Awesome. So I guess let's jump into it. Let's start with the very beginning. We have the connection questionnaire, and I think in the financial services industry, we're raised on having a fact finder. But at the end of the day, people buy from people they connect with. And we built the connection questionnaire to help really facilitate a unique connection between the advisor and the prospective client. Greg, talk about how this tool has helped you in the initial meetings, not only for yourself, but as you've brought on other advisors at Hammer Financial also.
Yeah, and I think the way the process is set up is years and years of experience. And to me, the Dean Sullivan questions that you start off with. Now, I haven't been in the Discover appointments for quite a bit of time, but that's what we practice. And I remember still vividly when you start to engage with the client with those questions, the connection begins. And then they begin, and when you start talking about strengths and weaknesses, especially when you start saying, "Hey, what's your wife's strengths? What's your husband's strengths? What do you feel are some of the weaknesses? What are some of your fears? What are some concerns? Where do you see yourself in 3 years?" They begin to connect with you in a way. It's John Del Greco is probably the best we know at this type of connection, but you need to get that relationship beyond, okay, I can't tell you how many times they come in because of how we prep, right? With the fit call, they come in and they would have everything all ready for us. And we don't go there first, right? Those are the numbers, that's the backdrop, but you just really need to spend some time and find out what is the most important thing to them and what are they trying to accomplish. And then more importantly, reassure them at that point, you're in the right spot. This is what we do. This is what we specialize in. We don't engage with everybody. When I start with that initial part of it, you're here because we feel like we can bring value and we're going to show you how to accomplish the things you're concerned about.
Awesome. And just as you were telling some of those stories, it reminded me one of my favorite episodes of the Bucket Plan on Demand we've ever recorded was probably 3 or 4 years ago. You came on and you just did storytelling and analogies around the bucket plan. And I'm sure pretty much everyone's heard your story of the sump pump and when you need to have a backup sump pump. And you give really great analogies that I think everyday people can relate to. I was at the gym with the training just the other day, working out with this lady that I work out with every week. And she was like complaining about her UPS or UBS advisor and how like she has a portion of her portfolio she manages on her own. It's in individual stocks, and then he manages the rest. And anytime she needs an income, he's always trying to get her to sell her stocks instead of his portfolio. And I was joking with her and I said, "Why do you think that is?" And she goes, "I think it's because he's charging me a fee on the stuff he's managing and not a fee on the stuff I'm managing." And I was like, "Yeah, you really don't need him as an advisor. You need a better advisor who's more like your co-pilot." And she was like, "That's a great analogy. That's what I need. I need an advisor who's a co-pilot with me. He just wants to be the pilot and he doesn't want me doing any of this stuff. And I love doing it." And again, I think, Greg, you come up with these things off the top of your head nonstop. It really is your superpower of just being able to create relatable analogies and words and conversations to clients. Let's talk a little bit about in that connection questionnaire, though. As you're diving deep into the Dan Sullivan question, what concerns, what priorities clients have, I know inevitably they start sharing some of the problems, right? Some of the pain points. And far too often, it's really easy for us to want to try to display how smart we are and that we can fix these problems and start getting into solutions. Like, how do you kind of transition or address those concerns, but build credibility for yourself, and really keep them on track with the process?
There's a lot of things, right? It's hard to always just pull from the air, but I think one of the biggest things that I learned actually reinforced back in Pittsburgh was when you get to these issues and you agree with them, I can see why these are concerns for you. I can see why you have these types of worries and why you want to accomplish and create solutions. And I'll ask him, I says, that being said, you realize that in order to do that, whether it's with me or with somebody else, it's going to require you making a change because doing it the way you're doing it, we've already identified that it's not going to get solved. So I think just that first mental hurdle, right? To have them understand it's not about what I'm going to present right away as a solution. It's about the fact that to get to a solution, you're going to need to make a change. And a lot of times when you ask him that, David, just I do it on my fit calls before I schedule with him, right? And we had a very knowledgeable person, and she was working with a very good person at Morgan Stanley, and she's wanting all these things. And I just flat out said to her, I said, listen, you want all these things. These are a concern, right? And you understand that at Morgan Stanley, you're not going to get this tax planning and tax management. She says, yes. I says, so you understand that in order to solve your concerns or your priorities, whether it's with me or with somebody else, you're going to have to make a change. And she goes, I can see that. I says, let me explain how our process works. Unless they reach that mental hurdle that, because otherwise it's bells and whistles, right? Those are all the solutions that you have to do as an advisor. But what they want to understand is we're going to solve that priority, that concern.
Yeah, I know I took that away from you. You shared it in our planning committee meeting after the June Mastermind Collegium in Pittsburgh, even going back to the fit call, the introductory call. I've started to ask that to clients as well. Are you willing to make a change to achieve some of your goals and objectives or address some of your priorities? And quite frankly, I've had some people on those intro calls that are like, no. And I don't want to waste my time trying to have them come into
Exactly.
a discover meeting at that point. And I think it sounds like you and your team are carrying that language then, not just in the fit call,
But
but
all the way through.
so
Yeah.
that by the time it's time to make a change.
They have to make the change. A perfect example. I asked a couple when they come in, one of the questions I still love, and I started at the presentation level. I says, as a married couple, we see couples come in all the time. And one of the first questions I ask them is, what happens to your plan when the first spouse passes away? And I always get silence, whether it's in a group setting or whether it's one-on-one. And I'll continue the question with this. Now we understand that this is not an if thing, right? This is a when thing. This is an event that's going to occur. And part of what planning entails is to anticipate these when events. That's what planning is, right? Anticipating when you're driving down the road in the rain, you hit a pothole, it still hurts. You never saw it coming, right? But it's still going to be very painful. And that's what you got to get them to understand. We're not looking at your moment in time. I love Dave's phrase. We're trying to improve your overall, whether it's reducing lifetime taxes. I tell people predictability. I'm a boring planner. I like things to turn out the way you want them to turn out. So what our job is to shrink the variance. It's nice to look at scenarios when everything's going well in the market, but what's your plan when the market's not going well? Because those are the things that are going to make their minds start thinking, right, something's not in my plan. I haven't had these. I guarantee you, 95% of my having discussions purely about performance.
And Greg, you're still doing a lot of the fit calls, right? Or no?
Yes.
Okay. Same with me, right? Like I know you and I have talked about that a lot, where for me, that's the ultimate sales opportunity
Yeah.
is the fit call. And then other advisors in the firm can plug into discover, design, deliver. And obviously those are incredibly important too. How much of this language and these questions are you using in your fit call? I know at Allison Wealth, we actually changed our fit calls from 25 minutes to 45 minutes in time that we're allotting. Now, if they're like simple, straightforward, it might not take more than 15 or 20 minutes. Point them in the right direction, tell them to go to Social Security Administration or find another advisor who is a better fit for what they do. But if it is a good fit, then I want to be able to have some of these types of conversations with the prospective client. But what are you doing? Like, how long are those calls? And what are some of these questions you're bringing into that conversation?
Yeah, we still schedule it to half hour. Of course, the fit call is always prefaced at the seminar. Here's the purpose of the call, right? I say what the purpose of the call is. It's really simple. It's to understand a little bit more about what's important to you. What brought you to this room tonight? What are some of your priorities, concerns, goals? And then it's really an opportunity for me to help understand a little bit about what resources you have. What are you currently doing so that I can answer questions intelligently for you? And then it's an opportunity for you to ask questions about us, how we engage, how our processes work. So I set that up as the premise, and I repeat that at the start of the fit call. So you get into that kind of quickly. So I would like to do a little bit more connection, but I do the connection, Dave, when they start talking about their concerns. If somebody says, what you said about tax management is really important, I said, why is it important? I don't want to pay more taxes. So it's good. I'll tell them, I say, you understand that you don't have to pay more taxes. It's a choice. Unfortunately, in our industry, one of the challenges in our industry, the reason why I left the traditional industry is they handcuff us. We cannot do in the real investment world tax planning because there's a fear of it, right? There's a fear that the person's going to explain it wrong. It's complex. Now, you don't need to understand all that. That's why one of the potential reasons why you would engage with a company like ours. But let's talk about some of the other things that you have. What are some other your concerns? I'm really concerned about how to optimize Social Security because I talk to people all the time in the presentations that start there. I tell them, listen, everybody's done the math with Social Security. Greg, I've done it. It's going to take the 78, 79 for them to break even. I'm going to get as much as I can, as soon as I can before it goes broke. And everybody in the audience nods their head. But I said, let me ask you a question. What's the most important thing to you? Is it the gross check or the net check? Because if you're anything like my wife, she doesn't give two hoots about the gross check. It's all about what's getting deposited. So you evaluate that purely on the standpoint that you think that's going to be the number you're receiving all the time. Let's look at optimizing it. And how would you optimize it? So it's beyond the numbers. I talked about one of the ways I look to optimize Social Security is one of my concerns is making sure Julie's taken care of when I'm gone. So I really have no intention of collecting my Social Security before age 70. Now, that doesn't mean that would be your reason, but that's how you need to look at optimizing your plan. It's how are we going to address some of the main concerns that we have, and what is the best way to do it? Guess what? The difference between Social Security at 62 and 70 for my wife is going to be about $2,000 a month. I consider that a pretty good insurance plan. And so I use these examples when we start talking about planning to get them beyond the numbers. You got to get them beyond the numbers. If they're stuck in the numbers, that's what they've been taught their entire life by their advisor. Here's the numbers. Here's how good we're doing. That's great. But let's talk about how it's going to address things. And so it starts with those conversations. Those are the same things I have in the fit call. And I get to a point where I say in the call, I says, listen, based on this brief discussion we have, and Dave, this might be why I keep it to a half hour sometimes. I said, we don't need to get much deeper than what we are based on what you're talking about. The reason I have these calls, we don't engage with everybody. But if they're not somebody we're going to engage with, I want to give them guidance and advice. And I would have just given you some guidance and advice and tell you a couple quick things to do. But I really feel there's a value add here for us to start a relationship. Based on what you're telling me, you realize that it's going to require a change. I'll now introduce that, right? It's an issue for you. It's going to require a change. Yes. If not with me, it's with somebody, right? Are you open to making a change? Because if you are, I'm willing to engage with you and take you through our process to show you how we could address these issues and how we can make improvements in your overall planning to specifically address the things that you're concerned about. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is make it more predictable outcome. That's what they want. It's just the biggest fear. I say in seminars, I said, one of the biggest fears clients have when they walk into my office is the fear to spend money. Why is there a fear to spend money? Because they don't have answers to the what if questions. What if I need it for this? What if taxes go up? What if inflation increases? What if market volatility goes nuts? I said, so in the planning aspect, so you have wealth, right? And it's there, but there's an inherent fear to spend it. So what typically I see happens is there's a fear to spend over the best years you could spend the money, right? When you're the youngest in retirement, when you want to punch through your bucket list to a point in time where you don't feel like you can do it anymore. I said, don't worry. Your kids will spend the money for you when they get it. And they laugh. That's the exact reaction I get. So what my objective is to give you the confidence. It's part of our core values. It's our purpose. My job, if I'm doing it correctly, is give you the confidence to spend money now. I say it in every seminar. I say it in presentations. I reiterate it. I don't want to hoard your money. I want to show you how to spend it. I want you to enjoy retirement. That's our objective here. And get rid of those fears. Create solutions, validate it for you. And there are some numbers I have to go through, but at the end of the day, I use the comparison all the time to my mechanic, right? I go to my mechanic because I trust my mechanic. And he tells me, you got to do this. And he begins to explain everything under the hood, right? And I tell him, listen, shut the hood. I don't care about under the hood. That's why you're my mechanic. That being said, I need to understand how to maintain the car, right? I got to know how to do the oil changes. I got to know when to rotate tires. When the light goes on and I'm worried, I got to bring it in. But then they fix the light. I don't want to fix the light. Give me my car back and make sure it's going to run smooth and last as long as it can. So I actually tell my clients during the presentation as we're going through the design, I go, anytime you want me to shut the hood, just tell me to shut the hood. Dave had clients tell me, can you just shut the hood? Because I don't understand any of that stuff. I go, no problem. Let's talk higher level. Because it's a good gauge. They don't want to know how the engine runs. They just get in the car, drive down the road, and not have to worry about being on the side of the road.
I can't tell you how many times Greg's called me about ultra high net worth cases, and Greg tells me to shut the hood because he's done hearing. He'll say, Dave, shut the hood. Just come in the meeting and tell the client this stuff. There's a couple things, Greg, that at least stood out to me, and I want to open it up for questions. I know Charlie's got one. Anyone else, feel free to ask Greg or anyone else on here. But some of the things that you did is, gave that story of the reality of it is no two people are alike, and you're educating on some of the trade-offs. Like anytime an advisor brings me in on an ultra high net worth case, I just did this with Dave Buchwald and Greg Dillon and a client this week. They came in and they introduced me and I said, look, the reason I'm here is I get to sit down with families just like you every single day that have had the fortune of accumulating a lot of wealth, that have 30, 40, 50, 60 million dollars or more, and all of their goals and objectives are different. And I can come in and share with you things that I've seen them do that have worked and things that I've seen them do that have not worked. And I could educate you on these trade-offs, but no two people have the same objectives. One person's objective might be to leave a giant inheritance so the kids and the grandkids and the grandkids never have to work again. I have a lot of other clients who take this approach of trying to die with zero, and they want to spend every penny that they have. And so my role here is just to facilitate these types of conversations with you. And that's very similar to, Greg, what I heard you share of your story with the Social Security one is something that we could all use, like how you shared why you're delaying Social Security till 70 as a benefit to Julie if something were to happen to you. So I think that's huge. And the other thing is like making them laugh. because you're having this serious conversation. And then, like, you made everybody on this Zoom meeting laugh when you said, if you don't spend it, your kids will, right? Like, all of our clients can pretty much relate to that. Just two really great kind of takeaways. Charlie asked, when you're using the income gap assessment and you identify there is an income gap and you ask how much of that income gap they want guaranteed, how do you explain the trade-offs between the options or why somebody may not want 100% of it guaranteed? And I can share my perspective, but Greg, why don't you start first?
When you're asking the gap, the reason I always ask the question is because it's going to present potential oppositions that they're going to have in the delivery, right? They're going to immediately gravitate to whether they want that or don't want that. And it's a comfort level with the client. Because to me, I'll explain to them there's a lot of different ways that you can increase promise-based income. That's the language we use, right? That guaranteed income. You can delay Social Security. You could add fixed elements. We could buy income. We can try to do things that would create a lot more predictable outcome. I says, now the value of that to me coincides with our core purpose. I want you to feel good about spending your money today. So the best way that I can make you feel good is to understand that the back end is addressed. So part of what our planning with that in the solution of it, it's what do you like? So if you don't like this, that's fine. If you want to learn about it, we can explain the value of adding it because insurance products will provide a lot of value in this arena because that's what you're doing. You're ensuring that your predictability of your plan. And you just got to quantify it for them. I talk about discretionary assets a lot in the whole planning process. What is a discretionary asset? Asset I can spend without destroying my plan, right? So if we can create discretionary assets, we can solve a lot more issues, whether it be traveling, enjoying what I want to do, legacy, how can I pull it out, addressing long-term care, whatever it might be. But I don't overcomplicate it at that point. To me, it's a question about it. And if they're adamant about, are you talking about an annuity? I'm like, I'm talking about how much you want guaranteed, right? Because you could delay Social Security to add it, right? Or we could look at creating interest to just live off of interest. But I tell you, with a yield, it's very difficult because to me, it basically imprisons your assets, right? The assets can't be spent if we're living off of yield, and there's no guarantee how long that yield's going to last. It varies, Dave. I don't know if you want to add a little bit.
Yeah, I typically get this question a lot because we work with a lot of engineers. I find it's mostly the engineers that ask what Charlie's asking. Explain the trade-offs between the options. Because most of the non-engineers, it's maybe a little bit more emotional. Like they'll be like, oh, I want 100% of it guaranteed, or I want half of it guaranteed. And they can come up with a number a little easier. But when somebody asks me, why wouldn't I want 100% of it guaranteed? I basically say, it's about how much variability you might want in your retirement and how much uncertainty you might want. For example, if we design your plan to provide you with 100% of your income need guaranteed, you never have to worry about what's going on in the stock market. And you're never going to get a phone call from me saying, hey, the stock market's had a big correction. We need to reduce your income. You need to reduce your standard of living because the market's down 20 or 30% this year, and we shouldn't be pulling as much out of your portfolio. Remember when we spoke about that money cycle and the biggest mistake people make, right? But on the flip side, if we have less of your income guaranteed and we have a big return in the market, you might be able to spend a little bit more than what your normal accustomed standard of living is because we maybe just had a big gain in that year. And so a lot of it just comes down to stability, variability, and uncertainty. And so how do you weigh those decisions in your own financial life as you look at the future? I have a lot of clients that will tell me, Dave, I want all my baseline expenses guaranteed, right? I want a paycheck that covers my insurance, my grocery bills, a travel budget every year that's a non-negotiable, my property taxes, right? And list off these expenses that they know they're going to have no matter what. And then I say, and then some other folks they say, hey, for any of the additional fun money, the dinners out, the additional trips, the gift money that we give to the grandkids, I'm okay with some variability there and maybe not having that guaranteed. And what I found is like giving examples of what those trade offs are. And there is no good and bad, there's no right or wrong, right? It's just what is most appealing to them, but ensuring they understand the trade offs. Because if they decide to have a lot of their income non guaranteed, and we experience another 2022 where both the stock market and the bond market go way down, and that client doesn't adjust their spending pattern, they could have some serious long-term issues in their financial plan. And so I think if you just relate examples like that is typically how I've addressed it.
Before we're out of time, Dave, just said that I love showing them what Dave was talking about, having at least the baseline. Because you say, look, you're going to spend more now. We want to spend more now. A lot of times we create these plans by saying you got to spend the same throughout your lifetime. And I show people, look, let's be realistic. At 75, are we going to be spending at the same lifestyle we are today, or at 80? No. We can project out to 95, but let's be realistic and say at 80, we're spending 2/3 of what we're spending now. And having that baseline in there frees up assets for them to spend it during the years they can go out and travel and do the things they want to do.
Yep. We all talk about, I know I have it right on my website under our retiree section. There's different planning for the go years, the slow go years, and the no go years. And that's exactly what Hammer's talking about. So appreciate it, everybody. And remember, Greg Hammer is available on the Mentor Connect portal. Thanks so much, Greg. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bucket Plan on Demand, brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Subscribe today for the latest episodes and insights. Visit c2penterprises.com to learn how we can help support and enhance your advisory business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable, but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.